I want to make sure I take care of them first before I worry about me. And that's obviously something that a habit you have to form and repeat that every day, because we can very quickly be like, I don't have time for that. And I'll get back to you later. No, this is way more important, right? No, they're the lifeblood of the business. If they stop, we stop. And so why would I put the cart before the horse? Why would I flip flop it? And so I want to make sure they're taken care of first and foremost. And so that's what we need to do as leaders. We need to make sure that our team is served first, because if our team is properly, equipped, they're really engaged, then they're going to be super effective to the clients.
How well does your leadership serve the people you lead? How often are you thinking about whether you're a servant leader or a different kind of leader? And how much thought do you put into that service first approach? It's a useful thing, not just for customer service and customer retention, but also for staff engagement and staff retention. And so my guest today will be talking through all of these things with us, from that seemingly ever-present buzz phrase recently of staff engagement, engaged people. We'll talk about some of the statistics in that area as well. But also we'll hear about his approach to leadership and that service-first approach to a whole business, not just leadership or customer service or anything else, but all of it. His name is Clif Savage. He is a business owner, a consultant, and he helps business leaders work from the top down in an organization to improve the way their systems and processes work, with the specific goal of improving recruitment and retention of high quality and well-engaged people.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Clif, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's great to have you on the show. Really looking forward to our conversation today and seeing where it may take us or not.
Yes, thank you, David, for having me on. I look forward to this.
Yeah, me too. And we'll kick off, really. I'm just going to sit back and hand over to you and be lazy for a little bit and let you introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a bit about your background, your career so far, what you get up to today, and why you do it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So, I'm on this podcast with you today because I want to share what I believe in, as a business owner myself, but mostly as a consultant to others business leaders, working from the top down in organizations to help them kind of improve the way they use systems and processes to more effectively recruit and retain higher quality, higher engaged employees. But yeah, I'm here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in the United States. I've been in business, this current business for going on 5 years. I have been a freelance consultant since 2016. And I've been in organizational management and process improvement since 2008. And so I've had a lot of hands-on from the very beginning on the front lines, predominantly in manufacturing, but also in contracting work, construction work, and service-based brick and mortar stores. I was part of a fitness franchise, a cell phone franchise, drugstores, stuff like that. So seeing a lot, on the front lines. Also was in middle management, and having two businesses, I've obviously been at the top. And so I know looking down and having employees with both companies and big teams. So yeah, it's been a great learning experience for me. But along the way, what I was trying to fix, right, when I saw problems, others didn't want to listen. My bosses didn't want to implement, or there's too much red tape, right? So that's why I went in business for myself. And that's why we're here today to talk about what I believe in and what I'm trying to do to help others.
Well, I think everyone can identify with that last remark, definitely.
Yeah.
Who's not been in that position? Well, I've got an idea. No, don't want to hear it. Too expensive. Too much paperwork. Back in your box. Yeah. The key phrase, and certainly it seems to be the buzz phrase recently, in recent years anyway, is engaged people, isn't it? I mean, there's some stats out there. You probably know them better than I do, but I think the Gallup one always stands out in my mind about global employee engagement. And I think it was, I remember the UK was a lot worse. I think we were like 17% of employees or something said they were actively engaged at work. I think the US was quite a bit better. I think they were like 22%, something like that. And the global average was, between those two, more or less.
Right.
So it's obviously a problem, isn't it? I mean, what are the impacts though that has on a business if your workforce is just unengaged? I mean, we've got quiet quitting. That's the other buzz phrase, which is basically describing the same problem, isn't it? But maybe you could tell us a bit more about some of the things you've seen.
Yeah. So, I mean, even from my experience being on the front lines, 15, 16, 20 years ago, like my experiences of being that disengaged employee, even though natively I had a great work ethic, I thought brought up well, I loved doing good work. But I wasn't nurtured. I wasn't taken care of. I wasn't guided. I wasn't even told right or wrong. I'd maybe find out down the road, if that. And then there was just, finger wagging, not really a discussion. And so a lot of times you just become disconnected, right? Sure, companies have missions and visions and values and all that stuff they plaster up on their walls and on their social media pages, but like we don't see that day to day. We don't feel that day to day. I think that was one of the biggest issues from my experience being on the front lines, being a technician, being in the field. That disconnect, like what am I doing? Why is it important? Because it's hard sometimes, right? Whether it's hard work, monotonous work, stressful work, you can really get disheartened. And if someone's not there to continue to encourage and nurture you and guide you, then you're going to become disengaged because you're just going to shut down and try and reserve your energy, right? So that's kind of like the biggest thing I've seen is training's not new, right? Training programs are not new. Development programs, employee onboarding programs, those things aren't new. But and I know you were saying like, having engaged employees, that's one of the bigger buzzwords lately. Servant leadership is one of the big buzzwords. I mean, heck, even a business coach is a new buzzword that's really, blown up since the pandemic. And I just kind of ignorantly got into those things. I didn't like Google, hey, what's the most popular thing to get into business right now? Or what's going to sell and what's booming right now? I didn't look any of that up. I just connected to the dots of what I saw the problem, what I felt I was capable of doing at this stage, and where I wanted to kind of see things get to with the right team and working with the right types of clients. And so trying to make that person engaged really comes from actually caring about them, like to the nth degree on every level. I even believe there's a side of it where giving them options, not mandatory, but giving them options on how to help them on their personal side of life will benefit their professional side too. And a lot of companies are very, hands off with that, even having that discussion, but then you're just you're letting them bring their personal problems to work. You're making them deal with it themselves. And I'm not saying hold their hand or enable them, but there's a much better way we can engage employees. And, I have some of the solutions, but we're still learning on ways to figure that out better, every single day, especially as the generations of workforce keeps, revolving as well.
Yeah, the generational point is quite interesting. I mean, when you said about the finger wagging, maybe this speaks to my own biases, but that image popped into my head of the kind of I don't want to say the older generation, but the previous work generation, let's say. And when they hear about things like quiet quitting and even the way that is talked about, it feels like it's quite blaming the workers and the employees and the team members rather than looking at the root cause, which, and again, I'm biased here, but in my opinion, is leadership.
Yes.
I'm obviously bound to say that. But,
I can't, because I've been in business. I've been a leader and I've let people down, whether in other people's businesses or my own. It going into business saying, hey, we have a business. Hey, I'm hiring you. It is my responsibility to give you everything you need. And if I miss something because I didn't take the time to check all the boxes, that's on me. And so I've tried to learn to be much more prepared and having the systems and having the people around you that can prepare everything properly so that doesn't happen. And not everything's perfect. There's always room for improvement. We continually find new root causes that we have to diagnose, but yes, it does come from leadership 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in much the same way as it's quite easy to just blame a bad manager or a bad leader, I think it's also quite easy to blame the quiet quitter for the fact that they're not engaged at work. But I think the fact is, just like that bad manager, 9 times out of 10, they're not doing it maliciously. They've not set out to ruin someone's life at work.
Exactly.
Neither has the disengaged worker decided one day, right, I'm going to be disengaged. I'm not going to do it. I'll show up. I'll get the paycheck. I'll do the minimum. That's all I'm going to do. Most of the time, that's not done maliciously. It's done because they don't feel like the employer really wants them to be engaged. They're not giving them that guidance and that support. Exactly as you say. And responsibility is definitely the right word. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. And communication. That's a big component, and that's a huge critical piece that we, with our clients that go through our whole package program, it's like a 60 business days, 3 months program, is the number one thing we start with is communication. And it helps with speaking to the right person in the recruiting copy. But to your point, all the way through the process, this reason that we get disengaged, whether it's the manager or the frontline employee, we get complacent. We go into survival mode. But ultimately what's happening is we're breaking that connection. Or maybe it wasn't fully formed to begin with, right? Like onboarding, here, go, good luck, bye. There's no, you don't have my number. I can't call you and ask questions, or you're not right by my side. The communication was never started, or it was broken. And so we have that as a cornerstone of their toolbox as a leader, that they use these communication tools and principles with high level data of each individual personality to emphasize when almost like any relationship, right? A marriage, family, friends, whatever, business partners. We're going to go through our own seasons, and we're going to ebb and flow. We're going to get hot and cold, but we can't let that break the connection of communication. And so being able to kind of go back to that ground zero or that baseline is critical to knowing we're going to have busy months, crazy months, right? That's part of growth, right? You're supposed to be busy. It's not a bad thing, but we mishandle it. And then when things are slow and not that much pressure, not really worried about anything, and you get a little too comfortable, right? All those things play into how strong or how weak the communication is prioritized, emphasized. And so having that stuff helps kind of combat that complacency and that, okay, I'm just going to survive and just look out for myself because I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it like that, it's a very human response, isn't it? And I think, I mean, the busy point is well made as well. I like to think of good busy and bad busy. I think good busy is that sort of the growth and the what you want. Yep. Bad busy is the procrastination, think of as many different things to do that I prefer doing than what actually needs to be done.
Right. Yeah.
We all do that. I've done that this week.
It's a coping mechanism.
Sometimes it is. Yeah, there's something difficult, or you just don't want to face it, so you go and record extra podcast episodes instead, or do something like that.
I'm being productive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is sort of productive,
which it is. Yeah,
I'm sounding defensive already. Yeah,
there you go. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk more about you. So, service-based businesses are what you've kind of honed in on, I think. So can you share some of the reasons and the aspirations behind that, why you're so dedicated to helping those types of companies?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, it is the service-based businesses. And so that's why the company's name, Service Leader Systems. It's a play on words because, yes, it's companies that want to be leaders in their service industry, but it's also leaders that want to be service to their employees, to their clients. And so it goes both ways. But from my experience, just because when I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to go into a bunch of debt and still not know what to do. And so I was fortunate enough, locally, we had a lot of manufacturing companies in this area. And one of them was building a brand new plant and was having a massive hiring. The government was involved to help stimulate the economy, stimulate the workforce locally. And this was, almost 2 decades ago now. And so I jumped on that opportunity. And then I put myself into night school. So got my degree at night. That kind of just set the path moving forward because I like working with my hands. But I also like the intellectual, process driven, organizational development side of things too. And so while I like being in the field, I like getting my hands dirty. I also liked not just having to be a grunt all the time and know there's a better way to do things, and very quickly gravitated where I got put in the middle. So kind of like what you were even saying earlier, David, about the manager struggling, the employee struggling, but yet we're still on the same team, but we would lose sight of that. I found myself constantly getting pushed, not walking into it, constantly getting pushed into the middle of everything, to be a mediator, to say, hey, wait a minute, we're on this together. We're not actually two separate sides. We're in this together. And that journey kept pushing me into service-based businesses. I've never really messed with selling products or, anything like that. It's been all, process driven. So if I can view like an assembly line in my mind, I can work with it, because there's going to be bottlenecks. There's going to be inefficiencies. There's going to be a need for expansion of the lines, adding new people, training them in different ways, altering their responsibilities. And so because I feel more capable and really have my head wrapped around that, that's where I want to spend our time working, because I know the probability of success is, almost 100% versus other businesses that I don't know. And because of that framework, I can get into any type of business within that industry after that. So it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant, roofing company, painting company, electrical company, like they have their nuances. I can learn their language. My team is great with their references and their resources to really tap into that, those specifics, but the framework's the same, pretty much. So that in itself makes it very easy for us to apply not a cookie cutter solution, but the same proven framework that we will mold, a little bit to fit their business and their size and their needs and their future goals and everything like that. So yeah, we've just settled into the service industry, and there's a lot of people we need to help. So we're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Fair enough. Yeah. And so tell us more about this approach to leadership then. So leadership through service. Is it like servant leadership? Is there more to it? Is it basically the same? I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, it's basically the same. My approach to servant leadership, or serving others first, that's why I call it service leadership systems, is the idea that, kind of like what I said earlier, if you're starting a business, or if you're even taking over a business, right, as a CEO or whatever, president, the top person in that company, it is your responsibility to take care of everything in the business. It's not your job to be on it and micromanage it and have your hand in it, but it is your responsibility to make sure it is working properly and being taken care of properly. Everything from the money and the talent that you have and the, trucks, equipment, office, all that stuff, and having the right people managing those things. You grow that though, as you start a business and grow, right? At first you are the direct point of contact, but as you grow, you have, middle management and everything, but you're still the one ultimately at the end of the day that before you go to sleep at night, you need to know that everyone was taken care of. When you wake up in the morning, you have to think about how everyone needs to be taken care of before you need to take care of yourself. That's one of the biggest things I block out of my day when I first get in the office, is to make sure that if usually I don't miss anything by the end of the day, right? But the next morning, I'm there waiting on my team's emails. Social media marketing, podcast scheduling, my technical writers, my project specialist, whomever. I'm there for them first thing in the morning. Or if there was things we needed to discuss, I talk to them first, because I want to make sure they're set up for their day and they're good to go. That way, one, if I get caught up in anything, they don't have to wait endless hours for me to respond. But two, I want to make sure I take care of them first before I worry about me. And that's obviously something that a habit you have to form and repeat that every day, because we can very quickly be like, I don't have time for that. And I'll get back to you later. No, this is way more important, right? No, they're the lifeblood of the business. If they stop, we stop. And so why would I put the cart before the horse? Why would I flip flop it? And so I want to make sure they're taken care of first and foremost. And so that's what we need to do as leaders. We need to make sure that our team is served first, because if our team is properly, equipped, they're really engaged, then they're going to be super effective to the clients. The clients are going to be well taken care of. If the clients are angry, if they're frustrated, if things are going bad on the job site, I can't fault my team because there's something I missed before that, whether it's training, whether it's taking care of them, whether it's placing the wrong person in the wrong seat, which we have tools to fix that. But ultimately, it all trickles back down, trickles back up from us, that it's our responsibility. So, that's my biggest thing. When I wake up in the morning is check on everyone else first before I check on myself. And it's not to usurp the theory of put the oxygen mask on yourself first before others. No, I have my quiet time first thing in the morning, and then once I get my day going, I talk to my team first before I talk to my clients or my networks or anything else,
I think it's a good way of looking at it. And the oxygen mask analogy, I've heard this before. I don't know if I agree with it. Like, if it was literally about the oxygen, maybe.
Right, on the plane, yeah.
It's not, right? It's, I think for me, leadership's always been about putting the people first, even before yourself when appropriate. And so I really like hearing your approach there. And I think the other aspect of it that shouldn't be underestimated is the psychological impact that has on your people when they see that the first thing you're doing every day is watching out for them, making sure they have what they need, and so on and so forth. And we were talking about procrastination earlier, and you're absolutely right. It's so easy as a leader, isn't it, to just get caught up in it. I don't have time to check on this now. I'm really sorry, but I can't solve your problem now. The ever-present smartphone or the emails or whatever it is, I've got to go and deal with this important phone call. And it's everyone falls into that trap at some point in their leadership career. Yeah. But I think if you get into that habit, you form it as a habit.
Yeah.
As soon as you can, it sticks. And then you don't have to worry, or it's easier at least.
It's easier
to get yourself back on the right path.
There you go. Yeah. You can fall off, but you can get back
on. I really like it. Yeah. And I think that's why servant leadership generally is so powerful as well. It's just the way you are perceived as a leader almost.
Yeah. And it trickles down to that, with like my project specialist that manages our technical writers, and eventually as we grow and have more of a sales marketing team, having managers in place for that. Right. And them leading their people. And it's not something we're going to slap on our wall. It's not a trend, right? It's the cornerstone of our business. It's the primary principle that we operate from. Because if we aren't like fully committed to that, people are going to see through it. And, as soon as things get tough, get busy for good or bad reasons, it's going to go to the wayside. It's just like your manners, right? If you have good manners, no matter what's going on, we all have our moments, but, generally speaking, you're still going to have your manners no matter what's going on around you. But if it's forced, if it's fake, you're I don't have time for that. Throw it out the window. And so, I really emphasize that it's through our oxygen that we breathe, that's what's coming out. Because if not, I've been in businesses where we didn't have that, and I don't want to go back to that. So that's why we do that authentically as we can.
Yeah, I can certainly identify with that as well. It reminds me of another conversation I was having yesterday with a fellow leadership trainer and coach, and we were sort of lamenting between us about the tough economic times that we've seen of late, and how that tends to make businesses pull back on training, especially training in things like soft skills in inverted commas, like leadership, which, whether the perception of that is right or wrong is a different argument / conversation.
Yeah.
And yet, it's those difficult times when people are worried literally about whether they can pay the bills and keep the roof over their head, when leadership can have the most impact, when it's the most important.
Yeah.
So it's not, if you're going to cut back, do it when things are going well.
Exactly. Save that money for a big launch forward, right? I have, oh my gosh, how many companies I worked in and then, worked for with my clients that whether it's slow times, right? Just naturally, cyclically through their year that, their business slowed down. They would fire people. They would tell people to go home early. They would cut people's hours, right? And a lot of their competitors would talk about that stuff too. And I'm like, and so it's really an industry trend principle in a lot of businesses, because it's the natural defense mechanism. Well, we're making less money, so we got to stop spending, so much. We got to spend less. You're backing yourself in a corner. You're painting yourself into a corner, because now once you get busy again, you don't have the time to train, right? When we're busy, we can't train. But when we're slow, we don't train. That never made sense to me. I always love when there's like a heavy rain day or there's a bottleneck in production, not of our doing, but of the client or whatever. And they're like, stop, right? Stop production. And I'm like, perfect. Here's our laundry list of trainings that we were planning on doing the next time we had a moment to breathe. Let's do it. And it made the day go by too, right? We don't want to just come into work to twiddle on our phones. I could do that in the comfort of my PJs at home. No, we have work to do. It made people excited to come to work, and it made them better. So once we got busy, it's like, oh, you know how to do this now. Go over there and do this, please. I've always, it breaks my heart when I, know that when times are slow, we slow down our progress too. We're pretty much letting the environment and the economy dictate our success, our progress. And that's completely on the, the defensive. And you're always going to struggle if that's the way you operate, unfortunately.
I guess it comes down to prioritization, doesn't it? And this is another subject that comes up quite a lot in terms of the priority for the business. Is it keep the shareholders happy? Is it revenue before all other things? Or is it looking after the people and managing all of your stakeholders, not just the ones flinging money at you? And I think one of those things, I mean, for me, the answer is always the people bit, inevitably. And I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Like if they're bean counters, not to use the unpleasant terms for them, but if they control everything, then of course you're going to look at things like training, at marketing, even things like that, HR. The things that you can't directly tie to pound signs or dollar signs coming through the door. Then in that mindset, it's very easy to cut things like training and to let people go and just think, well, I'm doing the right thing in the moment. But it's such a short-term view, because as you say, people will remember that. And then when things pick up again, if they ever do, where, you might get stuck in there, won't you, with that mindset. But assuming you're lucky or you manage to put it together and things do get better again, and you need people, but you've let them go and they don't want to come back because they remember that you let them go. Or the people you've retained remember that when things got hard, you cut their perks, you cut their benefits, you wouldn't give them training. So they won't work as hard. So you're not going to be able to close the gap when you need to.
That's a huge, I believe that was a huge catalyst of the quiet quitting. Over the past couple of decades, all the economic, downturns we've had across the world and all these massive layoffs, constant layoffs, especially in the tech industries, but manufacturing, service, brick and mortar everywhere, healthcare, even the government, but not as much, I guess. Just like you were saying, the person who's still here may have lost some benefits, but they also know the person that was working with next to them is gone. They could be next. And that sits in the back of your mind, whether you realize it or not. And whether it's a bad, micromanaging boss that talks bad about people to you, and you're like, well, when are you going to talk bad about me? Or what do you say behind my back? Same thing when you're letting those people go, because I get it. The business has to survive hard times, right? They don't control the whole economy, but you have to address it. You can't just brush it under the rug and think, oh, they'll be fine. We'll get back to normal. No, there is no normal after that. So you have to have a conversation about that. And to your point, I've worked with several Fortune Global 500 companies that, trying to please the stakeholders and the people, on the front lines. We've been able to help kind of pinpoint where is the value really coming from. How does this make each individual person valuable, and being able to see that on paper for them, because that's what they got to see, right? I got to speak their language, so I have to present it in a way that speaks their language, and then present it in a way that speaks language to the frontline people too. And so I just wanted to make a comment about that, because I've found ways to balance those parties. But it's different in every company, every group of people, it's different, but it's also the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a challenging balancing act, I guess. As you say, that's the right description, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I do sort of feel like it's a short-term versus a long-term way of looking at it, though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, it's the people that bring the value to the business. You know, especially for these types of leaders who are making these kind of decisions in the wrong way. They're usually, I mean, this is an unfair generalization, but they're usually the sort of people who won't lift a finger to do the work themselves.
Right.
And so, you know, in the short term, you might think you're saving money by getting rid of a few people to get you through across the difficult time. But
right,
who's going to do the work? Like,
yeah,
you probably won't want to do it yourself. Yeah, as I say, unfair generalization, but yeah.
Yeah, you cut a couple zeros out, you know, on the bottom line, but then that other salary over there's looking and like, oh, so now I got to do twice the work, 3 times the work, 4 times the work. All right, I'm going to start looking for another job now. And so you cut out a lot more zeros than you were planning to. The ripple effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's difficult, I guess, for a lot of industries where they do have to have that fixed premises. They've got the big machinery involved and all that sort of thing. But, you know, when we're talking about tech or office roles, like maybe the first thing you cut should be the big swanky office that you don't really need. Work remotely. I mean, there's a huge cost saving there straight away.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other ways to skin the cat.
Yeah. It's never quite computed for me, that particular bit. It's particularly in the COVID context.
Absolutely. Yeah. Businesses can be so agile now. You know, we talk about the manufacturing principles and organizational principles and being agile, right? Being lean. A lot of companies want to talk about that, but they, you know, before tech really blew up and the solutions and the programs we have available to us now, it was a lot harder to actually do that, you know, physically a couple of decades ago. But now we have no excuse. We have no excuse. And so, yeah, when I see that we got to make cuts, there's a lot more ways you could do that and make it work. But is it the mindset of, no, this is how we've always done it. We've always had a brick and mortar, or no, we can work remotely and still keep people productive without having to keep, you know, security cameras on them like we did when they were physically here.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? It's, I mean, it's part of the reason, I think, as well, at least part of the reason, maybe the whole reason, who knows, for the whole Great Resignation thing as well, was these same sort of issues. I guess the bit that I really get confused by, and it's easy again to make assumptions without knowing, but is in the sort of the post-COVID era, is how many of those businesses that found a way to keep things going, in a lot of cases were more efficient, more productive when they couldn't have people going to work.
Right.
And yet, at the first opportunity, they're demanding everyone go back to the office or to the factory or whatever it was. And like, yeah, you know, again, if there's a physical location and you can't do the work unless you're there, like in a factory, okay, fair enough. But if it's just an office, like, I don't get that. You've already found a better way of doing it.
Right.
It was mostly more efficient. You got, on average, probably more working hours out of people because they didn't have to do the commute. It was a lot easier for them to just have lunch at their desk because they're at home anyway.
Right.
And they were probably, in a lot of cases, happier not having to do the commute.
Or control of their environment.
Yeah, and control of their environment, able to manage their life a bit better as well around work instead of the other way around. And yeah, and then you choose to go back and reset all of that progress. I don't understand it. Really, and I know some people like the office environment.
Right.
Fine. Not everyone does. I don't know. I really like hybrid. I think that's the way forward. That's the future.
Yeah.
Because that human connection is important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't get the mindset of those companies that are just like, no, don't talk about it. Everyone back or you're fired.
Right. Right. Yeah. and it's, who knows the dynamics of why they had to make those decisions with the shareholder involved. There's so many pieces involved. But aside from the causes, right, the effect is, a detriment to the workforce, because we're not dumb, right? We saw how it worked this way. We've seen how it works this way, and we like this way better. So why are you making us go back to that? It doesn't make sense. And if it's on the bottom line, that's all they see. If they don't see the negative effect of what's happening to the workforce when you bring them back, they're not in tune, or as intellectual as they may think they are when it comes to business knowledge and leadership. If they don't, account for that as well, because it definitely takes an effect.
Yeah, it's easy, isn't it, to assume, as I said before, but I can understand why so many people feel like it's just an ideological decision rather than a business decision.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're one of those workers who's been doing a much better job from home, and you're like, well, why? I was more productive. And is this about control? You just need to see me, or you don't trust I'm doing the work, even though I have been for like a year and you've seen the results.
Right.
There's a disconnect somewhere that I'm not understanding clearly. And I don't want to just be like, oh, it's because bosses are rubbish. They're all micromanagers. It's all about control and status and real estate maybe. And because that's unfair. I don't have the knowledge to be able to say that with confidence.
Right.
But there's a knowledge gap there as well, because they're not really sharing.
No.
I don't think they're sharing credible reasons, are they? Like, they're saying it's about the bottom line, but how can it be? If people were more productive and you had a lower cost base because you didn't have to have an office,
right?
How can it be about the bottom line? Anyway. I'm going to go around in circles on this for hours, so we better change topic.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so let's talk about building effective teams. I mean, that you've hinted at this already about how it's more than just what a leader does when they're at work. I think there's a holistic strategic view to be taken here that starts before you even hire that team.
Yeah.
And probably ends when they start moving on to their next better job, potentially. So what impact do you think effective team building has on the success of an organization? And can you give us some tips or hints about how to manage that end-to-end process?
Yeah. I mean, number one, I mean, effective, concentrated team building and having the right, like you're saying, holistic approach and understanding of how a team and, each individual team member affects each other and the team as a whole. That's paramount to acknowledge, to want to seek to better understand, and to want to be able to effectively systemize that process, right? To have the metrics as much as possible, and to have the conversations, and to, with tech nowadays, you can record all those meetings and transcribe it. So like you can have those conversations and look back on the history of, that stuff. Patrick Lencioni has some great books. One of them is called Working Genius. And if anything, if you just listen to the audiobook and hear the examples of how people interact with each other as a team, and how they try and learn how each individual's person's strengths, weaknesses, and everything affects each other. And the lack of understanding, the lack of, having that conversation really hinders a team's growth, because we haven't refined it. We keep circling back to the same issues, the same problem child, the same whatever. And so really acknowledging the importance of that, and then addressing it with a solution is key. One of the things we use in our company, and we've used it for years, and we implement it in all our clients' companies, is the DISC assessment. So similar to Working Genius, Myers-Briggs, there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of personality assessments and whatnot that kind of help at least shine some light on, individual personalities. Our tools, our systems that we use have these team charts and interaction guides. So it's actually like a target graph holistically of everybody on the chart, where they're at, how the organization or a department is leaning, right? If you have more of a thought-oriented group of people, or if you have a really outgoing group of people, and maybe it's half and half, and they're pulling away or pushing against each other. And so all those little dynamics we use as insight to then have those real-world conversations, both as a group setting. So I essentially would observe them having their interactions together and taking notes on, how this person talks over this person, or this person, never talks or whatever. And then having one-to-ones to share my observations and then work together again to come up with some new ways to find improvements and share that information with each other so we can all be more aware of each other's tendencies, respect that, and then work towards, greater good individually, but then, as a team. That has been huge because, for leadership especially, it gives them the tools to really know their people and really communicate to them as individuals. Because like we were saying earlier, sometimes people are just looked at as a number, right? Or as a conglomerate, and they're not looked at as individuals. I have an identical twin brother. We are almost in many ways we're the same because we grew up together. So we have the same humor. We have, a lot of the same perspectives on things, but then there's many things that we are completely different on, right? He would never do this right now. He would never be in front of the camera talking. He likes to be, in his tools, in his machines. That's his happy place. And this is more of my happy place because I like to share answers and ask questions and learn, right? And help others learn. If someone just looked at us as identical twins and talked to us as identical twins, they would be missing 50% of the time, at least, if not more, depending on what they're talking about, right? If they want to talk about business and they're talking to my brother, he don't want to, plug his ears. He doesn't want to hear that, right? And then there's things that, if they try and talk to me thinking they were talking to him, I'm not going to know what the heck they're talking about. So if you use that case in a company and you look at two people and say, well, you're the same title, right? You're the same position, and you talk to them and treat them the same way, you're missing so much potential there. Or you're even creating more barriers of communication, more barriers to trust, more barriers to having an engaged employee because you're placing them in a bucket that they're not even supposed to be in, and so arming yourselves with that data to enlighten yourself and enlighten each other, and then use that as a common language within the company, knowing, hey, we're all broken. We all need to improve ourselves. So no one's on a pedestal here. No one's beneath each other here. We're all trying to improve. Then it makes team building easier to continue doing, to sustain that, and to see actual change over time, not just spinning your wheels and saying, oh, well, we're trying. We have stuff that we can bite into. And we can, just like any coach, right? You can mark that notable progress or stagnation over time. But then over time, right? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, see the trends, see the difference over time. And so we help put some of those systems in place to help with the team building because, that's the most critical part. I don't care if it's a team of 2 or a team of 20 or 200. Those principles need to be there or you're going to have problems. And as you grow, those problems that were maybe hairline fractures at the time with all this new weight, of glory is now creating massive cracks and gaps and pressure and frustrations. And they were there all along. You just didn't see them until you got too big. And that's where a lot of companies, as they grow, they struggle because of that.
That's a great analogy, I have to say. It's, because it's like any fracture, isn't it? If you might not notice it until you put weight on it, and then suddenly, there's bones sticking out where they shouldn't be. Yeah.
Gosh. Yep.
Big graphic. Yeah. Sorry.
No.
It's a weird coincidence that you mentioned Patrick Lencioni as well. I'm actually rereading at the moment, 5 Dysfunctions.
Yes. That's a good one too.
And the reason I bring that up is because there's a whole story in there built around the away days.
Yes.
And you're talking about the DISC assessment, and it's triggered a memory for me about the away days we had to do at various businesses when things maybe weren't going too well. And the outside consultant comes in that we see for that one day and then never again. And they make you do the Myers-Briggs or some other personality test, in inverted commas. And then, I have mixed feelings about these tests as a result of that, because I think they're really useful for an individual who wants to take it to learn about themselves and apply a bit of self-awareness and identify areas to maybe build on or lean into if they're the strengths and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to use them in a corporate context where the business is saying, everyone take this test and then we're going to learn about each other, or we're going to change our behavior, or we're going to victimize someone who doesn't fit with the others. Yeah, my bias is showing again, isn't it? Anyway, I think the key
You're not the only one. Don't worry.
Yeah. But I think the key to using those things effectively is what happens in that book, in the 5 Dysfunctions story. And I think is what happens in your process as well, is the follow through.
Yes.
You can't just do it in that one isolated, here's an away day, everyone have a free dinner and everything's fixed. You've got to then do the work afterwards.
Yeah.
You've got to identify the lessons. By all means, do it in an away day setting, get everyone out of the office or whatever. Great. Change of scenery helps, definitely. But then when you get back to the office, how are you going to apply what you've learned in that process? And who's going to hold people accountable? Are they going to do it themselves? Are they going to be responsible to each other? What's the agreed, consented to process by which those learnings are going to be applied? And then how are you going to make them stick? And that, I think, that's the real art of it, isn't it? Yeah. I'm sure there's science in it too, but you know what I mean?
There is. Yeah. Psychology in it. Definitely. I mean, in science, that's huge, right? With anything, so often I've come across, prospects or people that have become clients or whatever, just people, learning, how can you help me? And I start digging deeper and they have all these things like that. That's just collected dust. And it's a psychological thing. It's a, habit, right? A lack of, priorities, lack of, consistency on the leadership side of things that negatively affects everyone else, right? In the company. And so our goal, obviously, with a couple of things, right? Qualifying our clients or qualifying our prospects, going back to the part of using these types of assessments for good or for evil, right? Because they are, with any data, you can manipulate it in good or bad ways. Manipulation is bad. So just bad ways, but you can use that for the wrong purpose. That is something we do our best to disqualify right from the beginning before we even work with somebody like that. If we know someone is more in it for the money, they're more in it for, themselves, and this servant leadership is just a trend, it's just a facade, we're going to learn very quickly about that. It's going to uncover itself very quickly because people, when we start working together, they quickly lower the guards and just they take the filter off right after, they've been good for 1 or 2 meetings. Like, oh, this is the real person now. We see that and we see the trends. I can identify that. I've been doing it for so long now in my business and others that we help guard against that by pre-qualifying. But then you get back to the other part, like you're saying, is because of us emphasizing this whole system process, these tools are used in every bit of it, from the recruiting, the onboarding, and the retaining, training, everything, right? Because that's the cornerstone of the business. If you want to serve others, you have to know how to communicate to them. That means you have to know how you communicate, receive communication and give communication. And so all these things, coincide with each other. So if you miss one, you affect everything else. And so we highly emphasize that throughout our whole onboarding experience, but also throughout the work we do. And then that's a critical piece that they have to use in their troubleshooting, of the recruiting. Why aren't we getting the right candidates, or why aren't we getting any candidates, or, the screening process, or, with troublesome people, that they already have. And why is this person acting this way? Why does this person say this stuff? Right? Having those tools and knowing that everyone's a part of that, including leadership. Like, I start with leadership, not the front lines and, we have data from no, we start with you. You lead by example. We're going to go with you first and then we go down. Versus when I work with companies and it was bottom up, and that's where all the struggles came from. So that's why I start from top down. That in itself lends to helping really ingrain it as, their principles for life, even for people that we've done just kind of like workshops and whatnot. And they didn't use us for consulting after that. Right. Or kept us on. They still have all that stuff. They've had that experience. And the more that we stay in touch with people, the more that they continue to consume our stuff, the more that will stay top of mind for them, because it's in everything. If you don't have communication, you're always going to be struggling, whether it's in sales, recruiting, training, doesn't matter. If you're a poor communicator, there's always going to be struggles. And so it's just a matter of, we stick with the disc because I feel like it's simple, but there's a lot of tools that show a lot of the same data in different ways. That makes it very applicable for our services, our industries. But ultimately it has to be the person that has the open mind that wants it and wants to use it properly. And if they don't, then there's a big pool. We got more people that we can work with. So I put that out there, not in a prideful way, but I put that out there because I don't want to waste their time and their money.
I have to respect that. I have to say it's something I think, again, business owners all struggle with that, don't they? Like turning away the wrong client. It's an acquired skill.
Yeah. Well, because you've learned,
Yeah.
Our name is on their product. Yeah. If I put their logo on my website, I want people to say good things about their company being associated with my company and vice versa. I don't want there to be none of us are perfect, but I don't want there to be like, oh my gosh, you work with them? How'd you help them? I guess I didn't.
Yeah. What can I blame you for? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't even want to step into that because then I don't want to have to try and get out of that because then it gets messier.
Yeah. And again, we're back to long-term versus short-term, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, just keeping an eye on the time, I'm going to skip ahead and we're going to talk about leadership in a bit more detail. And the first question I have for you on that is, what's the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
The biggest leadership lesson I've learned in my career so far, I would say, was at the beginning of my career, and it's led me throughout my whole life. And that was, I was very fortunate that when I got into manufacturing, when I got into my first, real big job, I had some amazing bosses, and I'm talking director, supervisor, manager, very experienced people, very personable people, and we're very oriented on developing and training others from the get-go. That made the world of difference because then, fortunately for me, I learned the good side of things first, and then I got to experience the bad side of things later. A lot of times people get it one way or the other. I was very fortunate that I had 3 bosses in a row that were amazing bosses, amazing leaders, that taught me a lot. One, by my observations of them, just my interactions with them, watching them interact with others, just the general health of our department, right, of our teams, how they handled challenges, just observing a lot first, right? It wasn't like sitting down, they were teaching me. But then it was the personal conversations, the, overcoming challenges from myself with their help. And then learning and saying, okay, I guess I'm kind of wanting to kind of move up too, because I see that I can't make a lot of influence here. I have to move up here into the middle management. How can you help prepare me, or what kind, asking them questions about that and how they got there. And so I had a lot of great guides at the very beginning that helped emphasize the leading by example and focusing on serving others. And because it wasn't forced, because it was just natural, like naturally the department itself operated very well. We had our bumps here and there, new person come in, one person leave. We had our bumps, but because they were still involved and that tone permeated the department, it always made things a lot more possible, a lot more digestible, if you will. And so I was like, wow, this is great. And then I very quickly went into examples that were terrible. And I'm like, I want to go back to that. But I just then had to take it with me with where I went and kind of use to compare, boss to boss and business to business. But on a human level, on a personal level, those experiences set the tone and have followed me ever since. I've learned a lot since then and honed in a lot, hone my skills. But that, I will never forget that.
I think we can draw quite a few of the threads of this episode together with the phrase lead by example, can't we? And it's one of my favorite bits of leadership, really, because it's disproportionately powerful to how simple it is to execute.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, hearing you talk about your early career and going through that middle management experience, again, like very similar to myself. And I mean, I was immensely fortunate in my early career. Like I wouldn't even call it career, to be honest. It was temp jobs when I was studying.
Yeah.
But one of those jobs was for a few months during a term break, and it was for a fairly big corporate. And there was a really amazing leader that I encountered during that time.
Yeah.
Who's kind of been the gold standard in the back of my mind ever since, that I've compared every other leader to since that I've worked for. And I think, like, in a lot of ways, do you feel like that was actually a negative because it meant no other leader you worked for was ever going to measure up, and so you're always
too high,
frustrated? Like, because I feel like maybe I had that as a problem, really, because my standards were too high, perhaps. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like you, I've learned a lot since, and it's. I like to think if I went back and did that again, I'd be able to be a bit more understanding to some of the later leaders who didn't measure up. But what do you think?
That's a great question. I'm trying to ponder so I can give you a proper response. I'm like thinking, did I, have I really compared everyone else too harshly to them? I would have to say no, because I've had some decent leaders since then. And you can say what you want, about first impressions. I think that definitely had a part in it. I did have some great leaders in the middle of my career. When I say the middle, I guess really the end of my career and the start of my business journey. One of my last bosses, one of my last leaders. I don't think so, but I believe it set the temperature. It became the barometer. It set the temperature for what I believe was good leadership. And it wasn't to the point where I was nitpicky, about a tenth of a degree or a hundredth of a degree. But it was just that was, for better or worse, that was the baseline. And it wasn't like I was always holding it up to to them like, all right, let's see where you're at. No, it was experienced over time, right? This was experienced over, those first couple of bosses, leaders. That was years, 4 or 5 years, I think, of a journey with them. And same with several other the leaders. Most of them were for, a year, 2, 3 years. And so we had time together. You get those first impressions. Then you see who their true character is over time, over the ups and downs, over their personal ups and downs, right? Seasons of life. And I still feel like I had some good leaders at the end of my employment career that I felt were still great. Mm-hmm. And they still led by example. They still were like in it, right? They're in the trenches. They're in the weeds with us, but not to the point of being micromanaging. They were side by side with you, not, on their pedestal shouting down at you. And so I definitely still had some good ones that I learned different things from them, if you will. I'll put it that way. I learned something different from everybody. But there were some of those same principles that rang true from all the good ones, at least. So, yeah.
Yes. No, fair enough. I think, I think it's a good point as well about how well you know the person as well. So I think that, in my example, or at least a good example from my career, that one early on, one of the things that he used to do that was really, it was such great leadership in hindsight. I maybe didn't recognize it at the time, but he always had time for everyone. When he gets to the office, and when he gets to the office every day, first thing he'll do, he'll almost like do the tour and he'll have a little chat with everyone and see how they're getting on and what they did at the weekend. And it was like genuine conversation, and you could see the interest. He wasn't looking at his phone. I don't think phones were a thing back then.
Right.
They probably were, but they were like this big.
Right. Not looking at that.
They probably didn't have his emails on it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No PDA.
But he was present. Yeah. And then I compare it to the worst leader I worked for.
Yeah.
The other difference there is that the great one, I probably only had 3 or 4 encounters with him over the course of a 3-month time with the company. Yeah. Whereas the worst one, I worked for him for years. I knew him pretty well. And I do wonder whether the fact that I knew him that well meant that I understood more about the motives and what was maybe going on behind the scenes than I did. And so it's easy when it's a chance encounter, a passing sort of familiarity to assume good intentions, isn't it? Whereas someone you've suffered with for a longer time. Yeah. But the reason I pick him particularly as the bad example is because he used to do the exact same thing except he'd usually have his BlackBerry in his hand and wouldn't be paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
It would always be the same question to every single person, and there would be a cursory response, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I feel like, was that seen in a management book? And he thought, that's what I need to do to start building rapport with
Yeah.
my
Copy
people.
paste.
Yeah. And then was it the same for both of them? It's just one of them did it well and one didn't. And I do wonder that whole how well you know the person and how long you've worked with them. That hadn't necessarily occurred to me in the difference there, but maybe that was part of it. I don't know.
It's like a podcast or even like interviewing candidates, right? Two separate things, but like illegally, you're supposed to ask the same questions in interviews, right? True. But the conversation can go somewhere else if the candidate leads it and you can go with them. Same thing with the podcast. You may have fixed questions. A lot of people I talk to have fixed questions, but the conversation can go all over the place. That's being human versus, all right, we're going to check the box. 1, 2, 3. All right, bye. Move on to the next one, right? Like I come from manufacturing. I come from assembly line work and systems, but it's not supposed to be robotic and lifeless.
Yeah, apart from when it literally is robots, of course. Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's like, but, right now at least, humans still have to work on them when they break down or, act crazy. So, yeah. I
mean, as far as that goes, I think for the longevity of the human race, we should probably keep it that way, shouldn't we? We don't want robots able to repair themselves. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, that's just a whole nother level. Yeah, with AI, I might be able to, though.
I mention his name. Yeah.
He who should not be named.
Indeed. Yeah, I don't know. It's something I'm going to keep thinking about, that one, because it does play on the mind, doesn't it? Those sort of little differences and yeah. So, I mean, I've talked about some of the leaders I've worked for. You've mentioned one or two of yours as well. If you had to pick your best experience of being led, what would that be?
The best experience being led for me, I had one in the later part of my employment career. I had a boss that really poured into me. And he was the director of our department. He wasn't my direct line of contact. I had, my main boss was in between that. So the very few instances that I got to, hear him speak, got to see what he was working on, and for him to stop and talk to me and ask questions was not very often because he was involved in, many, many, many things that, not making an excuse, it wasn't his job to come check on me, but he still did come check on me, come check on our department. It was just, it wasn't mandatory. It wasn't that often, but when it did happen, he really poured into me his experiences, his lessons learned, even gave me, so like this one person I'm talking about, whether he'll remember or anybody else will know once I say this, if they're listening, he gave me, this book called The Theory of Constraints. I don't know if you've heard of that book. His name is escaping me right now, the author, but he was a physicist and he wrote a novel sharing the story of what he actually did in real life of going into a manufacturing company and using his, education to help really troubleshoot the dynamics of, manufacturing lines, assembly lines, production, supply chain improvements and the human element combined. And so it really gave this holistic view, but also this ground level, humanistic view, of troubleshooting essentially. And that's what I am. I'm a troubleshooter, systems, people, whatever. And so I really latched onto that book and it opened my worldview up in a whole new light in the job I was in, but also in the very near future where I went back into business in my second business, this one, the consulting one, was eye opening. And so, and it didn't benefit him. It could make me a little bit better at my job. Right. But it wasn't going to like, oh, we're going to make so much more money now that he's read this book. No, but it did make a huge difference in my life. Didn't affect him, didn't affect the department. Really. It did a little bit. I started applying it right here and there, but it wasn't a massive benefit for him, but it was a massive benefit for me. And that was massive. And so that book and those conversations with him after he gave me that book, he's like, read it. And then, so when we met again, he would ask me about it and I would talk to him about it or ask him questions about it. that was huge. And it wasn't prompted. It wasn't a requirement. It just came up in conversation. And he's like, hey, here you go. And so, yeah, that to me was like one of the biggest, just someone being present, just having a conversation, not forcing their agenda, right, or anyone else's agenda, and just helping someone knowing that they probably aren't going to get anything in return was life-changing for me. And that person being my boss, having way more people to answer to and problems to worry about, taking that moment and those couple of moments with me really stood out.
Sometimes it is those small little details, those little moments, isn't it? Because I think I blame Hollywood for this. I think we, as humans, we too easily look at leadership as the big grand gestures, don't we? The guy with the shield or the machine gun or whatever it happens to be. But actually, I think leadership really, it's in those small moments. It's the everyday stuff. It's the day-to-day. It's the making you a coffee that morning or whatever it happens to be, or just listening to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's a great story. Great example as well. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 more questions. Both quite difficult, I'm afraid. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Some people really struggle with them and others just breeze through as though it's something they talk about every day.
I'm ready.
So we'll see how you get on. No pressure. Yep. If you could go back in time, firstly, how far back would you go in your own lifetime? And secondly, what would you say to your younger self?
Man, I mean, I would say, that's even at 12, but like 18 at least. Had so much potential. And I don't think this is a bad thing, right? That's why I don't worry about going back in time and even changing yesterday, because I'm here today where I'm at and I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. So even with all my problems and struggles, if I were to say anything when I was 18, it would be focus a little bit better. Stop worrying about what others think. I think that was a big thing that really dictated my growth. It stagnated it. It kind of hurt it because I wouldn't ask questions. I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't try this. I wouldn't try that. At times in my personal development, in my personal relationships, because I didn't want to come off sounding dumb. I didn't want to offend someone, a lot of negative reasons that really is like, I don't want to deal with that stress or that problem. If I just didn't overthink all that stuff and just knew that I was going to stumble and fall, I believe in some ways, some relationships, some experiences probably would have been richer because of that, rather than being a little bit more of, I just want to get through this type of thing. And I feel like I could have probably learned more, and it would have opened up more opportunities, more experiences from that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well thought through as well.
From the heart, because
I
wasn't holding on to that. That just came out.
Yeah. I mean, possibly being too hard on yourself. I think it's rare that people in their youth, particularly that stage of youth, are that focused.
I was like 12. That's why I was going to talk about that. I was like, I was ready to get out of school. I wanted to have a house, have my own job. Like, I was ready to work. Crazy to think I wanted to rush life, unfortunately. But yeah, I thought being in the adult world was going to be better than being in school.
Yeah, and the irony is now we think the opposite. So
right,
the grass is always greener. Maybe that's where it comes from. That's
exactly. Oh man,
amazing.
Leadership heroes.
Okay, last question then. This is my favorite one though.
Cool.
It's called Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick one person, you could pick anyone you like, alive or dead, past or present, real or even fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership. Who would that be and why?
I used to be more into history than I am now. And I guess that's just because where I'm at in life, in business and having a son and everything else, caught up in a lot of other stuff. But I used to read a lot more history books and whatnot. One of the best books I ever read, in my opinion, I went to DC. Girlfriend at the time got me a book called Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, autobiography about Abraham Lincoln. Called Team of Rivals because it talks about his move through his youth into the presidency and all the way through all the challenges that he faced in America and in his life at that time. And a lot of it dealt with his cabinet, the people within his presidency, where a lot of the people were also trying to keep him out of the presidency, out of just, the government altogether before. And so he had to bring a lot of different people together, supporters and people that are against him. And so he had to do a lot of, and it wasn't even for himself. It was for the nation. I felt like, at least from, how I read it, that he was trying to solve problems and he needed support from both sides. And so it wasn't all right, well, I'm not, I'll just do this without you. No, he found ways to navigate conversations with difficult people and lead them, and essentially converted people to come and support his cause, to support his mission, and the American mission, especially during the Civil War and everything going on then. And that's huge, as we know with politics, you got to have the supporters to pass the bills you want and to do the things you want. And I feel like in business, no matter how big or small you are, whether you have shareholders or not, if it's mom and pop or whatever, you've got to know how to navigate conversations with difficult people, with people that are in opposition of you. And I thought that was a great read. I've read it multiple times. It's probably been a decade since I read it last, but I do need to pick it back up. But that book has really stood out to me on really digging deep on the life of Abraham Lincoln outside of, what we learned in school, which was, I felt, very repetitive, very surface level. This book really dove deep on his leadership and how he interacted with people of all kinds. And to me, that's one of the best examples of always, when people ask me that question, that's one of the main answers I give, aside from, for me, Jesus, but, the book, from Abraham Lincoln or about Abraham Lincoln is a great practical book that I feel like everybody should read.
Well, I'm going to add it to my reading list. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but he's been a very popular choice lately. I don't know if there's something going on in the national consciousness in the States, but
maybe more people have read that book. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But
I got on it before. It was cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think partly it's because he's a great choice to answer this question. And the whole consensus building and working with your rivals aspects of it is, I think, yeah, you're right. It's so important in this day and age when everything, every way almost that we interact with the world these days is getting so divisive, isn't it? The social media of it, the politics of it, the combination of those, which is kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
And I do feel, this is another aspect where I get on my soapbox, unfortunately, but I do feel like we're losing the art of argument.
Yes.
It's like you can't have that sort of friendly disagreement or be friends even with someone who doesn't share your views as much as you used to be able to. We're losing that ability to just have a disagreement and still be mates.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, I think. I think society loses a lot by that. Because if you're only mix of people who agree with you,
that's what we call an echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. It's a group thing. What is the point? How do you test your views and your assumptions if you never actually hear any others?
Yep, exactly. They need to go into business and try and market themselves. See how well that works.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Run out of business real quick.
Yeah, indeed. Although having said that, I very rarely have a podcast guest that I disagree with, which isn't really intentional, but
right, yeah. So, you get people that don't really like leadership on your podcast.
That's probably true. Yeah, they wouldn't come on, would they? But maybe that's why. Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks for being so generous with your time today. It's been wonderful meeting you, Cliff. Really enjoyed our conversation. Last thing I will ask you, though, is if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about you, perhaps get in touch, where can they go? Yeah, so the best place is our website, serviceleadersystems.com. Explains all my services, explains more about my work history. I've got an ebook on there that people can download if they want to revitalize their recruiting or start recruiting. And it's a 5-day plan in there that they can literally get going in 1 week, in 5 days. Also have my demo in there
for our training tool that users would experience. So you guys get a chance to demo one of the systems that we build, one of the programs we use. So it just gives people a lot more insight on what is it that we actually do and can actually help them. If they want to get deeper on like my daily thoughts, LinkedIn is where I'm highly active. I'm on all platforms. We post everything on all platforms, but I'm active on LinkedIn, which is just Clif S Savage on LinkedIn, and follow me, connect with me. Love to grow my network on there and meet new people and learn what they want to share too. So yeah, that's the best ways to find out more about our services, about me, and educate themselves on, free content that we put out every day. So yeah.
Great. All sounds excellent. And I'll pop as many of those links as I can in the episode description as well, so the listeners can find it easily.
Perfect. Awesome.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's definitely all we've got time for. Thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your day.
You as well. Bye.
Clif, thank you again so much for your time. We hit some really big topics there, and I hope all of the listeners, I'm sure they have, learned loads, got some insights from your expertise there as well. Listener, if you would like to learn more about Clif, as I say every week, check the description, click on those links, visit his website, reach out to him on social. I know he'd love to hear from you, and if he can help you, then I, of course, encourage you to get in touch. Thanks for being with us again today. Join me next week when I'm talking with Christian Espinoza about his life experience from growing up in poverty, joining the Air Force as a communications officer, then getting into cybersecurity, and then eventually starting his own businesses. And he's got some brilliant lessons in leadership, technology, cybersecurity, of course, and communications from all of those experiences. So that is going to be a wide and far-reaching conversation that you don't want to miss. And until then, keep looking for ways to serve your people better and be a leader, not a boss.